Okay, so today we're looking at inverse trigonometric functions, and by that I mean sine to the minus 1, cos to the minus 1 and tan to the minus 1. But we need to remember our function work as well, and that for a function to have an inverse it has to have a one-to-one mapping. So one value on the domain leads to one value on the range, and then when you take the inverse it takes you back to that one value. Now, if we think about our cos function, okay, and obviously also our sine function, we get this wonderful repeating pattern. But what that means is that on the domain, which is your x-axis, there are many values that take you to the same one value on your range. So we need to restrict that domain to ensure that we still get the entirety of the range, which is minus 1 to plus 1, but we have a one-to-one mapping. We always take the part of the domain that is closest to 0. So for our cos graph, it looks like this. See, if we restrict the domain from 0 to pi, we get the entirety of the range, but it's a one-to-one mapping. We don't have more than one value. This means that when we restrict the domain, our domain becomes from 0 to pi, and my range is still minus 1 to plus 1. This helps us then when we think about the inverse function, because if that was the range, the output for before, this becomes the domain of my inverse function. And the range of my inverse function is what I had previously as my domain. Knowing these and understanding these can help me draw my axis in preparation. Okay, so my axis for my domain is from minus 1 to plus 1, and for the range is from 0 to pi. Then we can draw our inverse graph, remembering that the inverse graph is a reflection of the original graph along the line y equals x. Exactly the same works for sine. Okay, for our sine graph, we restrict it though this time from minus pi over 2 to pi over 2. Okay, and you can see you still get the lovely entirety of your range. So that's my domain, that's my range, which means that for my inverse sine function, my domain is between minus 1 and plus 1, and my range is from minus pi over 2 to pi over 2, which helps me draw my axes, and then I can add on to that my inverse sine graph. Thank you.